Russian President Vladimir Putin could only sit and watch as Ukraine used one of the fighter jets his own country created to hit back at his regime. A Ukrainian MiG-29 has just sent a bomb right through the door of a bunker, wiping out several Russian leaders in a precise strike that neither they nor Putin saw coming. This never should have happened. Russia should have controlled the skies and stopped Ukraine from using its outdated MiG-29s to cause any serious damage. But Putin failed, and he now faces an ongoing MiG-29 threat to which he has no answer. On March 31, Forbes war correspondent David Axe reported that Ukraine had just managed to achieve the impossible. Ukraine's target was a defunct Air Defense Command bunker located in the country's Kherson Oblast. A key target for Putin since he launched his invasion, Russia initially managed to overrun the region, making Kherson the first major city Russia controlled. But by November 2022, a Ukrainian counterattack had pushed Vladimir's forces out of the city. Russia is still fighting to retake Kherson. Its troops are stationed in smaller settlements surrounding the city, with Putin battering Kherson with attacks regularly in an effort to retake the city. Which brings us back to the command bunker. Formerly under Ukrainian control, the bunker was taken over by Russian troops, a big hit for Ukraine to absorb. This particular command bunker was once associated with the Ukrainian S-300 missile battery the country relied upon to shoot down incoming aerial threats. Now it was under Russian control and could serve that same purpose for Putin's forces. Russia must have assumed the base was safe. Not only was it underground and likely featured fortified doors, according to Axe, but it was equipped with everything Russia needed to set up its own aerial defenses. Putin's plan was simple: use the Kherson base to protect his forces from Ukrainian aerial strikes. Those forces could then continue applying pressure on Kherson city itself, eventually leading to Russia controlling the entire region. The plan might have worked were it not for one wrinkle. Ukraine wasn't about to let Putin and his commanders keep control of the former S-300 command center. Using a special type of bomb, Ukraine was going to hit that bunker and send a bomb straight through its door, decimating anything and anybody who happened to be inside. It sounds like an impossible feat, but Ukraine just pulled it off. Using a modified Mikoyan MiG-29 fighter jet that's been specially prepared for precision bombing, using a weapon designed in the United States, Ukraine just decimated the bunker that Putin thought was a safe haven for his commanders. With this attack, Ukraine has just destroyed one of Russia's key Kherson headquarters, rendering leaderless the Russian regiments and brigades responsible for attacks on islands in the wide Dnipro River. One Ukrainian military blogger outlined the result of the amazing strike. The blogger said the attack minuses the high-ranking officer corps along with equipment. Such strikes deprive enemy forces of clear control and also significantly demoralize the military unit. The blogger concluded with a chilling statement: "No leadership, no landing on our islands." So, just how exactly did Ukraine manage to send a bomb straight through the door of a highly protected military bunker? After all, the strike shouldn't have been possible with the MiG-29. Codenamed Fulcrum by NATO, the MiG-29 is a Soviet-era fighter jet first introduced in the Russian military during the mid-1970s. It was originally designed to be a counterbalance to the then-new US F-16, with Russia specifically focusing on making its jets more maneuverable than its American counterpart. Russia arguably succeeded. It created a fighter jet that could reach a top speed of 1,519 miles per hour and had a flight range of just over 1,800 miles. The jet was light, fast, and packed with weapons that made it a clear threat to anything the US could deploy to the skies. That's thanks to the MiG-29 being equipped with 7 external weapon hardpoints. Those hardpoints allowed Russia to make the MiG-29 surprisingly versatile. According to Air Force technology, the base version of the fighter can pack up to 2 R-27 medium-range missiles, which are used during air-to-air combat with other fighter jets. It can also carry up to 6 R-60 and R-73 missiles, which are also used in aerial dogfights but have shorter ranges than the R-27. Add a 30mm aircraft gun with 150 rounds of ammunition and unguided rockets, including the S-5, the S-8 and S-24, into that mix, and you get a fighter that could cause serious damage to other aerial assets during the Cold War era, and one that still presents a threat today. Oh, and Russia could also load the MiG-29 with air bombs weighing up to 6,613 pounds that it dropped on ground targets. But it wasn't one of those massive bombs Ukraine used to decimate the Kherson bunker. As powerful as those Soviet-era bombs may be, they're unguided and couldn't be used in any sort of precise strike. It's more of a case of dropping them over the general location of a target while relying on their explosive force to do as much damage as possible. If Ukraine tried to hit the Kherson bunker with one of these bombs, it would hit the top of the bunker at best. That might be enough to do some structural damage, however the strike wouldn't have been enough to take out Russia's officers. Ukraine needed a different type of bomb, and the US provided it, the GBU-62 glide bomb. The concept of glide bombs became prominent during the early stages of 2024, when Russia figured out a way to turn its old fab bombs into much more lethal weapons. Back in May 2024, the BBC reported on these devastating new Russian glide bombs, noting that Russia was using special wing kits to create the weapons. These kits, which cost between $20,000 and $30,000, were being strapped to fab bombs, allowing them to be launched from behind the front lines so they could glide toward their targets. The Russian bombs aren't especially accurate. They also don't need to be. Putin has thousands of fab bombs at his disposal, allowing him to bombard Ukrainian cities and defensive positions with impunity. In March 2024 alone, Russia launched 3,000 of its glide bombs at Ukraine, with Russia later settling into a routine where it used several hundred of them per week to pound Ukraine's major cities. However, glide bombs were far from a unique Russian concept. They were used as far back as World War II. Ukraine even had glide bombs of its own, though it couldn't use them to their full capacity because of Russia's unrelenting attacks. Enter the United States and its Joint Direct Attack Munition, or JDAM. Like the wing kit Russia is using to create its glide bombs, the JDAM allows the US to convert previously dumb bombs into precision-guided weapons that can hit almost any target. The difference between the JDAM and Russia's glide kits come in navigation. A JDAM is equipped with a guidance system that, when combined with a GPS receiver, ensures the bombs are far more accurate than any Russia has in its arsenal. Ukraine has received JDAM-equipped bombs. Specifically, it has a stockpile of the GBU-62, which can weigh either 500 or 2,000 pounds, depending on the dumb bomb used, and has a range of around 46 miles when launched from a height of 35,000 feet. Also known as the JDAMer, the GBU-62 was first deployed by Ukraine's Air Force in August 2024 with the help of a US-led customization program that transformed Ukraine's MiG-29s into fighter jets capable of launching the bomb. David Axe provides more details. He describes the GBU-62 as American-made but uniquely Ukrainian. He notes that former US President Joe Biden spearheaded the drive to convert Ukraine's old MiG and Sukhoi fighter jets so they were capable of launching the bombs, noting that the US typically attaches its JDAM kits to small diameter bombs or SDBs. That makes the GBU-62 an inexpensive killer. Each bomb cost just $50,000 to make, with the JDAM's clever guidance systems making the bombs about as precise as a Russian Iskander ballistic missile. Those Russian missiles cost $3 million each to build. With the GBU-62, Ukraine can cause just as much damage for 1/60th of the cost. It's thanks to this clever bomb that Ukraine was able to hit the Kherson communication bunker. Axe outlines just how impressive a feat this was. When the Kremlin wanted to eliminate a Ukrainian headquarters in a buried bunker in Kharkiv in the early hours of the wider war 3 years ago, it first located the Soviet-built HQ in long-forgotten archives, and then aimed an Iskander at it, Axe says. Ukraine duplicated the feat with a small surveillance drone, a single old fighter, and one cobbled-together precision bomb. The bad news for Russia is that Ukraine can keep on building these JDAMs. And perhaps worse, this MiG-29 attack in Kherson is just the start of a new aerial campaign that threatens to leave many more of Putin's bases in tatters. Axe provides hints about what's going to happen. It's likely every one of the roughly 100 combat aircraft in the Ukrainian inventory, an eclectic mix of ex-Soviet MiGs and Sukhois, ex-Danish and ex-Dutch Lockheed Martin F-16s, and ex-French Dassault Mirage 2000s, is equipped for precision bombing using a host of satellite and inertially guided glide bombs. In other words, the MiG-29 Ukraine used to take out the Kherson bunker isn't a one-off. Ukraine has several more of them, along with other fighter jets that are capable of dropping GBU-62s. Of course, Russia still has the advantage when it comes to sheer volume of aircraft. It has 833 fighters in comparison to the 70 to 100 that Ukraine is capable of fielding. Putin has been using those numbers to his advantage for much of his invasion, and while he hasn't been able to establish aerial superiority over Ukraine in the traditional sense, those vast quantities of aircraft give Putin plenty of options when it comes to launching his own glide bombs at Ukrainian targets. The problem Putin faces is that volume may not be the winning factor he believes it to be. Axe points out that both Ukraine and Russia use jamming techniques to throw off their opponents' guided munitions by blocking the satellite radios they require for targeting. However, Ukraine has proven far more effective at this than Russia, becoming so good at jamming Russia's glide bombs that one of Putin's pilots says that only 1 out of every 16 of Russia's bombs is now hitting its target. By contrast, the JDAM-equipped bombs Ukraine is using, though still vulnerable to satellite jamming, have superior backup guidance in the form of inertial systems that calculate a munition's position by way of precise accelerometers, according to Axe. Russia, therefore, is spending more, both in terms of money and munition losses, on its glide bomb attacks than Ukraine. And as we see from the bunker strike in Kherson, Ukraine can also hit targets with far greater precision than Russia. Now that most of Ukraine's aircraft are capable of firing GBU-62s, Putin can expect a lot more attacks against some of what he believed to be Russia's most protected positions inside Ukraine. In fact, those attacks have already started. Over the last few weeks, Ukraine has conducted several successful aerial raids against Russian targets. Not all of them involve fighter aircraft and GBU-62s, and as so often the case, Ukraine is combining its new aerial bombing might with drone strikes to whittle away at Putin's positions both inside Ukraine and on his own territory. Take Ukraine's March 27 attack on a Russian border checkpoint. The Kyiv Independent reports that Ukraine's Air Force hit the Pogar border checkpoint, which leads into Russia's Bryansk Oblast, in a strike that killed dozens of Putin's troops and wrecked some of his military infrastructure. The attack came as a response to Ukraine's military recording drone activity near the checkpoint, which Ukraine believed could threaten the Sumy Oblast and its weakening position in Kursk. Ukraine's general staff confirmed that the strike killed between 15 and 40 Russian soldiers, adding, "As a result of the attack, the military infrastructure of the checkpoint was destroyed, along with means of communication and electronic warfare, as well as video surveillance systems and other technical means." Ukraine also condemned what it called Russia's cynical actions when it comes to using its drones to target civilian infrastructure to kill peaceful civilians. And just a few days before, Ukraine also launched a successful aerial assault against several Russian gas facilities. On March 14th, the Kyiv Independent announced that Ukrainian long-range drones had hit a pair of gas compressor stations along with a warehouse Russia uses to store its missiles for its S-300 and S-400 air defense systems. The gas compressor strikes took place in the Russian Saratov and Tambov Oblasts, while the attack on the ammunition depot took place in Belgorod. Ukraine's security service, otherwise known as the SBU, conducted the strikes. An unnamed source said, "The SBU conducted another successful special operation on enemy territory, causing significant damage to Russia's budget and reducing its ability to finance and sustain the war." Not only is Putin now being forced to deal with drone strikes on checkpoints and Ukraine's impressively accurate bunker-busting glide bombs, but he can't even rely on his air defenses to shoot down drones that are attacking Russia's territory. And Vladimir's also going to have to worry about Ukraine turning its growing fleet of F-16s into an attacking force sooner rather than later. That's according to Newsweek, which reported on March 27 that Ukraine has started using its US-made fighter jets to launch ground attacks on Russian targets. That's a big turnaround from how Ukraine used its F-16s before. When the first batch of these jets arrived in the country back in August 2024, Ukraine focused on using them for defense. They were successful almost immediately, and by August 27, the first reports were coming in that Ukraine's F-16s had intercepted incoming Russian missiles. December 11 saw Ukraine destroy 11 missiles using its F-16s in a single air battle, while January brought with it news that one pilot had managed to take out 6 6 Russian cruise missiles in a single mission. If that was all Ukraine used its F-16s for, Putin could deal with the problem. It isn't ideal, as he wants as many of his missiles to reach their targets as possible. However, Ukraine using F-16s for defense means they're not using the lethal jets to go on the attack. Except, now they are. In an interview, an unnamed Ukrainian pilot says, Ukrainian pilots operating Western fighter jets have demonstrated excellent results in combat missions against air and ground targets. And worse yet for Russia's leader, Ukraine's using the same types of weapons it used to destroy the Kherson bunker. Ukraine's F-16s carry high-precision aerial bombs, including SDBs and J-Dammer glide bombs, claimed the pilot. If we want, our bomb can fly into someone's window. The pilot may not have known how accurate he was, but Ukraine just proved him right with its command center assault in Kherson. So what does Ukraine's successful Kherson strike really mean for Putin and the future of the Ukraine war? One answer comes from the Dnipro River. Since early March, Russia has been attempting to seize a foothold in the islands that line that river in what The Guardian calls an attempt to gain more leverage in advance of future peace or ceasefire negotiations. The governor of Kherson, Alexander Prokudin, says that Russia's troops are trying to cross the river in 4 locations. Every single day they're trying to cross, says Prokudin. We heard from our intelligence that the Russian deputy commander told troops in the area that they had to force the river at any cost, though not all soldiers are willing to do that. In other words, it doesn't matter if those soldiers die. Putin wants access to more of Kherson via the Dnipro River, and he's willing to sacrifice his soldiers to get it. Prokudin says that Russia's casualty rate in the region is already high, and now that a Ukrainian MiG-29 has decimated one of Russia's underground command centers, Russia's Dnipro assaults are going to be even less successful. Its commanders have been eliminated. Now, Putin can only rely on sending human waves at the river, which Ukraine's forces will cut down. Beyond this regional issue, there's also Ukraine's escalating aerial game. We can see that from the MiG-29 attack and other recent strikes. However, the reality Putin must face is that Ukraine's aerial escalation has been going on since at least January 2025, according to the Atlantic Council. And Ukraine is striking deeper and deeper into Russia, scoring successful hits with drones and long-range missiles at distances of up to 620 miles. The strike underscored Ukraine's growing capacity to conduct long-range bombardments against high-value Russian targets, the Atlantic Council says. Of course, Russia rarely says much about the damage these attacks cause. It usually talks about shooting drones and missiles out of the skies, with any fires or explosions being the result of destroyed drone debris that just happens to hit the very thing that Ukraine targeted. But privately, Putin must be worried about this aerial escalation. Ukraine isn't just trying to take out Russian targets from the skies, it's regularly succeeding. The MiG-29 strike in Kherson also demonstrates that Ukraine is growing both more confident and capable in using its fighter jets to cause serious damage to Putin's infrastructure and military. Putin may have been happy with his failure to establish aerial superiority in Ukraine because he could still launch glide bombs and conduct aerial attacks from behind the front lines. But now, Ukraine is not only doing the same, but it's launching more precise assaults. The Kherson strike relieves pressure on Ukraine in a key area of the war right now, and Putin now has to be asking himself what or where Ukraine will strike next. Where do you think the next big Ukrainian airstrike will be? And what do you think about Ukraine's newfound ability to use its MiG-29 fighter jets to launch precise raids against Russia's entrenched defensive positions? Share your opinions with us in the comment section, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more updates about Ukraine's evolving aerial strategy. We're an independent source of accurate, up-to-date information about military conflicts around the world and greatly appreciate your support.